What if the biggest upgrade to Oklahoma's offense this year isn't the quarterback, the receivers, or even the scheme? What if it's the mindset? Because Brent Venables says the blueprint is already proven, and now it's about applying it to an offense that has to get tougher, more physical, and a lot more consistent. Let's get into Sooner Intel. Welcome back to Sooner Intel. I'm your host, Jason Watkins, along with my co-host, one of my co-hosts, Mr. Mason, Kchris Mason from Sooners 360. Kchris will be along when he feels like it. But if you love college football, especially those Oklahoma Sooners, you know you're in the right place. So before you forget, smash that red subscriber button. Like our videos, become subscribers, and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss a moment of Sooner Intel. Mr. Mason, welcome back to the show. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been on, but glad to see you. And hey, man, spring football is upon us. Good times.
We can actually talk about something. Well, I mean, we've actually got guys out there at practice, not theoretical, not potential. Yeah. We've got guys actually running, maybe running, doing drills. We've got as close to actual football content as we get until, what is it, like September 3rd, I think, or September 5th that OU plays, with the no week zero kind of schedule. So yeah, I mean, it's hard not to. I mean, everybody's undefeated, everybody wins spring football. I understand that, but it's hard if you're not getting a little excited by what you're seeing and hearing from the first 2 days of spring practice, of the real spring practice after the spring break. Then you're just not a college football fan. You're not a Sooner fan, right? If you're not getting a little excited by it, it's not getting your if you're not getting psyched up thinking about this fall, then I don't know who you are.
Yeah, man.
And you're certainly not listening to a podcast on Friday night unless you are one of those people. So,
Facts. Big facts, yeah. We're not doing a podcast on Friday night if we're not with those people, for sure. So, yeah, listen, I'm with you on that. And great stuff. We've been talking a lot about a lot of the things that, I think that you said it off air really well, that a lot of the things that we've been saying needs to happen. This is the next step for Oklahoma to take to not just get back to the playoff, but I mean certainly to get back, but to make a move forward in the playoff, to have an opportunity to win the national championship. You were going to have to do some things to, number one, service the running game, become a real running team, and commit to it. Maybe commit to changing a lot of things about it. I mean, something that we saw. I heard Gabe and Teddy talking about it. And I've heard a couple people talking about a lot of outside zone looks and things like that, which is a great thing. Which means that we're talking about tight ends that can get out on the edges, make a block, get that stuff, get something sprung out there to where they look good. We did not have the ability to do that as a football team last year with the personnel that we had and the way that and really the scheme that they had. But as much as I love that part, when you sent this to me earlier today, the quote of what Brent said, I just thought it was fantastic. And he said it's in order for them to transform this offense, which has been putrid the last 2 years. We don't have to say anything other than that. He said it takes the same attitude and mindset that it took to flip one of the worst defenses in college football and make them number one in the SEC. It's the same transformation. You're not going to do it by tricking anybody. You do it by having a hard edge, recruiting tough-minded guys, and getting great at fundamentals and technique. I mean,
manna from heaven for you, right? right? Manna from heaven for you, right? It's what you've been talking about. And
Hallelujah.
since most of the back end of last season where we were, we do our game reviews and we're like defense fantastic, and then we're like, can we just get more out of the offense? We were just,
Yeah.
we were like defense is playing great. I can't believe how well it's playing, and we get flashes from the offense here or there occasionally. We get some big plays. We get some big plays. The running backs were hurt. It was, we were just like, how can we get some more how can we get a consistent running game to help John Mateer not have to handle the ball every down, right? That was a little bit of what we were talking about too.
Yes.
And
Don't make him make all these decisions.
don't put everything on him.
Make a great decision all the time.
Yeah, I mean, and it's you have to be
Not
one
even
of these.
taking a shot. That may have sounded like it came off as a shot. That's not what I meant it to sound like.
Well, you're going to be one of those. I mean, even look at the Mendoza guy last year, who was the best quarterback in college football, right? By every standard we want to apply, for the most part, right?
Right.
He had a consistent running game that helped him. I mean, they physically ran the ball effectively, and that was a key part of why they won a national championship. So to hear, but I just love Brent talking about, he's like, look, this is how I fixed the defense, and now I have my defense is fixed, so I can spend all spring pushing that attitude, that chemistry, that kind of internal development model that we see on defense. I mean, we talked a lot about breakout players defensively when we did our show a couple of weeks ago about returning guys, not freshmen of influence, not portal guys, but like the returning core of the returning second and third year guys, right? And then Brent's rattling these names off, and then we're seeing these kids being sent to be interviewed. The first 2 days. I mean, we talked to Reggie Powers, we talked to James Nesta, we talked to Nigel Smith, and those guys look. That's Nigel Smith has apparently looked like the best defensive lineman because with Stoney and Jaden Jackson out, James Nesta looks great out there at linebacker. We haven't talked to Cole Sullivan, but when you watch the video of him out there, you're like, holy crap, who the hell is that guy? So, we saw those returning guys. I mean, Reggie Powers looks fantastic. Danny Okoye. I was talking to a source today that said Danny is just, everything's clicking for him. He looks faster. The game has slowed down for him. That they think he's going to have a massive season. And then you got Taylor Wine, who's basically the alpha in the room, who's basically saying, look, if you're not going to play 100%, I'm basically going to, to paraphrase, I'm going to kick your ass, and you're not going to play because there's lots of guys that are. So, so all the things we talked about that, we were worried about the defensive depth, and you just, I told Kchris a joke, on Wednesday. I said that a source that was at practice told me that he said that the source said, I'm a positive offensive line update from betting my mortgage in Vegas on OU making the college football playoff. He's like, that the roster, the talent is just clear. The talent evolution and development is just clear in terms of defensively, and that on offense, we'll talk about that room in a second. It was one of the lead-ins. That the pieces they've added on offense. And the guys that they brought in have, the wide receiver group just looks physically better. Everyone's raving about Jonathan Hatton as RB2. I'm happy X-Rob's going through spring. I was kind of surprised that he was. I was a little concerned that he was not going to make it. But he's going through spring ball, so that's a positive from that side of things. So yeah, it's. It's 2 days in. It's a whole lot of good content, and a lot of stuff that we were talking about. So,
no doubt. And I mean, we'll just welcome into the show. Always late, never always on time, and even though he's late, Kchris Griffin from the Horns Down podcast. Hey man, how you like it? What we're talking? Obviously, I don't know if you heard me say the quote that BV had said, but you read it, I'm sure, in the group chat. Talk about what that means. I think that as much as anything, it's a mindset change, and what we needed to see was more of that. And I think that that's kind of one of the things that you and I talked about. Leaving the stadium after the Alabama game, that you had an opportunity to show that you were the tougher team, and they just didn't do it. You know,
I would say I would argue just not the more disciplined team that night, especially. I think when you hear the because I've watched all those OU insider clips as well.
sure.
And to me, I think a lot of guys are hungry from what you're seeing. A lot of guys are excited about hey man, I'm finally getting that nod. It's time to go out there and prove it. Then you got guys who are just like, I listen to Powers today. He kind of seems like a vet. He's just like, hey, I'm just ready to go get to it. Then you kind of got guys in between, like Fasusi, who's like, hey, I got a lot to improve on. But when you listen to BV, it's what I've been saying all along, fellas. It's championship window talk. BV and company believe that they have something special, especially on that defensive side of the ball. I love it when BV talks about we got depth issues, right? We sit on here and we say, I don't think you got depth issues, but they want to build that. They want to build consistency. That's what he wants. So when I listen to him, I just think that it's championship window talk right there because they know what they can do offensively. I think you went and got the guys on paper at the very least, guys, from Hanson to Trell Harris, Livingston. You can go and look at Petit as well. You want to got him in his class, Jasir Rogers, guys like that you brought in, retaining guys, right? Bringing back Xavier, Robinson, Torrey Blaylock, and adding to that room, but also going out there and getting, again, the Hayden Hansons and really bolstering that tight end room. It's a lot of championship level talk. So on paper, you went out there and got the keys to unlock this offense. On paper, you went out there and did what you needed to do to address a lot of glaring issues offensively, right? A lot of
Whose cat's making all that noise?
It's mine. I'm trying to get my wife to.
a lot of the
Sorry,
issues.
guys.
Don't get me wrong. You could really point fingers at Arbuckle and an unhealthy Mateer, right? But at the same time, there were just things that we just simply could not do, right? We couldn't run the ball, couldn't necessarily run some of the blocking schemes we wanted to run with our tight ends or whatever. We just weren't able to do that. And then, after a while, just, teams have enough film and they pinpoint what you're good at and then kind of what you're glaringly weak at. And we had more weaknesses than we did strengths, to be honest with you, especially with Mateer dealing with some of the, the issues that he had down the stretch. I listened to Patel talk today, and I was like, that's a great comment. The Alabama game was about as close to those first 4 weeks of football from John Mateer that we got pretty much the rest of the way. That was probably the most complete game. The outside interception, but that was probably the most complete game. But again, when you listen to BV or whatever, that's what I'm getting from that. It's just championship window. I think that he knows that this could be a special year. I don't know if that ends in a SEC championship, just a bowl win, at least, but it could be, a deep playoff run. And I think that's where they're gearing up for. And I think BV really wants to address everything that he needs to address. And I believe in Arbuckle. I think his system will work, but there's just certain elements of that offense that need to actually work for us to be as efficient as we can. And it really depends on the run game, to be honest with you, because if you can run the ball, that opens you up to pass the ball like you did somewhat at Washington State. So I think there's just certain things that he wants to do. BV, and I think one of those is just really getting this offense to a level where he can really, focus in on the defense and some of those things that we had. I mean, kind of honestly, if you kind of pull back the curtain just a little bit and you go back to what last week or whatnot, I think Stoya reported that BV is meeting with Mateer, having one on ones, going over film. I mean, that to me is that should tell you a lot. That should tell you a lot of what he's expecting from this team this year, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I think
One of the
that
best things I heard this entire offseason was that conversation. We've had it so much over the last year
yeah,
about if you're Brent Venables, who's better to tell this quarterback what you're about to see from this defense and what you would do with it. You know, just it should be super helpful for that. Go ahead though. I just
no,
wanted to
no,
pop
no,
this
no.
thing on the screen real
You
quick.
keep going ahead. That's exactly what I was going to say. It should be extremely helpful, and I think it's important that you have that right there because, again, second year in the SEC, I think that it's only up from here because I don't think that you could really get any worse than kind of what it was at times last year. But I just think that better play calling, better scripts, better everything. There's a lot of different things that they can do, but you got a second chance at it. So let's see what you can do.
Yep. But as you see, there's the quote there, same attitude and mindset, and that's what I think that without really saying it, that is the mindset. It's the disconnect that we've had the last 2 years between one side and the other of the ball. Right?
Yeah, I think it's key to mention that I think Brent no longer sort of coaching for his job, with Nagy having taken a lot of the sort of administrative stuff off Brent's plate. And I was mentioning this to Jason in sort of our little green room that, and now Brent's got basically 5 guys that have DC credentials to handle the defense, right? So you've got the Northern Arizona guy whose name I forget, but he was a DC. You've got Dreiling, who was a DC. You've got Lamar Morgan, who was a DC. You've got Goodwin, was a DC. I'm trying to forget if I forgot somebody, but he knows that the defense he can spend more time with the offense this spring, right? In terms of making sure the retooling is going how he wants, and this mindset's kind of getting installed because the defense is it's got a 2-year proven mindset. You've got as Kchris was saying, you got Taylor Wine and talking about being a veteran, and then you've got the young guys who are like I'm not sure. I don't think we have depth problems. I think we have depth opportunities for all of these second and third year guys who are chomping at the bit to get on the field after last year watching, certain players ahead of them. So I think Brent has all of that going for him. So now he's like, I think to a certain degree, he's like, okay, I'm going to apply all of sort of my sort of chemistry, culture, powers to the offense, right? I'm going to apply all of my defensive acumen to the to Mateer. I'm going to tell Mateer we're going to do like counter kung fu. Here's what you're doing. Here's what the defense sees, and that's why they pick the ball off. And this is what you should have seen. This is what you should have seen. And then I think we joked, we talked a lot about that. We hoped that they were going to retool the offense and that Arbuckle, Wilson were going to sit down and kind of come up with a different offensive look. And I think it's pretty obvious they hired DeLon McCullough to help put this in, that they brought in somebody who is a veteran running back coach who knows how to implement elite running games and has had all kinds of exposure to elite offensive coaches. You bring in that veteran guy to help you transform our running game.
Especially everything we're hearing is that they're seeing a play that looks like it's going to be the bread and butter that wasn't, which is the outside zone or stretch zone, whatever you want to call it. But that requires it requires that you don't run an RPO set. It's getting out on the edges and hitting people and driving people off the football. And that tells you that, look, I think that the questions that we've all had is whether or not they were willing to implement to mandate that it get implemented, that we change the way that this thing is.
And we've just had Brent detail it. I mean, he said it on the Oklahoma breakdown. with Gabe and Teddy that the run game was pathetic. And that
Pathetic.
he's pathetic. He didn't, he was. I mean, he's very pointed with his words. He's very pointed with his language about what needs to happen with the run game and what needs to happen with the, with the offense. And then
Yeah,
you
but
see, and
you
then
also
you,
saw him on that show too. Not to interrupt, but just one of the things I wanted to highlight from that was he seemed like he was excited as he's ever been about his football team.
yeah, that championship window that Kchris is talking about, that he identifies that he's, he knows that he's got guys like Taylor Wine, he's got Kip Lewis, he's got Stone and Jackson, which is probably the best D tackle duo, as long as they're healthy, the best defensive tackle duo in the country. He's got three cornerbacks that, he's got depth at cornerback, he's got depth at safety, and it's and he knows that he's got a championship defense, right? I just need a maybe he knows there's margins that they won games last year that they can't rely on this coming year. So they need to have more points on the board and need to have more 2-digit leads in the fourth quarter and win games going away than it is defense getting stops.
Lean on these dudes. These dudes.
Then the defense, relying on the defense to make one possession stops with a minute to go.
Mm-hmm. It's about imposing your will, man, just like you do on the other side. That's what he said. Go ahead, Kchris.
And there were times, again, I think with BV's been saying it all along. He said it last year when we were all getting ramped up for the season last year. He's like, man, I'm looking for those guys who are not just great one day, but those guys who are just consistent. I'm not necessarily looking for you to be all the way up here every single practice, every single game. I need somebody who's just constantly there in that area, right? And at times, I think you saw that from the offense here and there during the season. Late in that fourth quarter against Michigan, that was one of those games where it just, you put together an 8-minute drive and basically killed the clock. South Carolina was another game. I think kind of those last 4 minutes of the or last however many minutes. Hold on, y'all. Those last however many minutes of the Auburn game as well. Those were minutes as well. It happened throughout the season. You just need more consistency. But like Stevie G said, it really depends on the offensive line. But I think you're going to get better offensive line play. You went out there, and I think you really got some guys. But listen to the breakdown. What's going to happen with Ozida? I think there are some really, really interesting battles. I thought we could, at this point in time, Chris Mason, I thought at this point in time that we could potentially say we know who our starters are going to be. I'm not necessarily sure right now. I think that it's kind of, you'll see guys go out there with the ones and all the rest of that stuff, but I still think that there's certain jobs up for grabs, especially on that right side of that offensive line. But again, I think it's there. Everything that you need is there. All the guys that you need is there, right? Just got to go do it.
No doubt. Again, the mindset, right? It's the mindset. And look, let's talk about what we've been hearing. These tight ends that we've all been excited about look like they're legit, the real deal. They're going to be able to block. They're going to be able to help spring some of that stuff. People are in here talking about the offensive line. I think the offensive line is doing its thing, right? It's, you've got a second year for a bunch of young guys that are figuring it out, and they're, everything we've heard about what's been going on in the weight room and stuff for the off season so far has been fantastic. Guys growing into their bodies and learning more. And, the second year with Big Bill is usually when these guys kind of start, understanding what it is that he demands from them to begin with, right? And so I think that it's what we saw from this offensive line at the end of last year, which was it got younger and it seemed to get better. And you've got some guys that are ready to prove who they are for that line and be in that rotation or whatever. But I think, I don't know, the depth there seems like it's going to be fine. And the other thing is you're helping your offensive line by if you're not basing everything off of an RPO set, then you're helping them be able to fire off the ball like we want them to do, right? We want to see them doing that. And that's a mindset too. If they're having to be back on their heels, that's not good for running the football. If they don't know what's coming, if they don't know if is Mateer going to hand it off here or whatever, that's not good. And so I think that the biggest hope that I've had is that, that they scrap that thing, scrap the RPO. You're going to run some concepts of it. I mean, you're always going to, no matter what. But I think that at some point, I'd love to see a lot more 11 and 12 personnel.
And effectively using them too, right? I mean,
yes.
So you see, the first day of practice when they were in the inside, you could just, I mean, you saw the Hayden Hansen, the routes that he was running and throwing the ball to Hayden Hansen, and it's like, holy crap, okay, that's, when we've got 3 real tight ends who are over 250 pounds. We haven't had that in forever. I mean, Beers is 252, Hansen's 269, and I don't know where OU's getting the 240 on Van Dorselaer, but everyone I've talked to says he looks at least 250. I mean, he looks in great shape too. So you've just got real, and then you've got Trene Washington, who's 265. So we go from like no guys who are really, no big tight ends that can really play, to 4 guys who are over 250, 2 guys over 260 who can get on the field. So and then you've got Jason Witten, just coaching the room very differently from early reports. And again, it's early, but it just seems to be night and day there as well. That's something not to be overlooked. The tight end coaching room is different. Witten is, has an NFL kind of understanding of the run and pass game that the tight ends have to have, because you can't do RPOs in the NFL. It doesn't work that way. So because you just get your guys killed. So it's very much a better that. And then the thing about it that I mentioned to Jason was that, I've been watching a lot of the pundits, and they're talking about offense. They're talking about the most obvious things. They're talking about OU's O-line has to play better. OU has to get a better push from their running game. Mateer has to make less mistakes. But I don't think they have fully grasped the upgrade OU has in the tight end room and how bad the tight end room was last year and how it was hurting a lot of what OU tried to do. I think for a lot of national guys, they just sort of default back and look at the Canick's receiving stats and don't really understand that Canick was a big slot. Our best tight end was a big slot, and we didn't really have a second tight end. Caden Helms was doing the best he could after 3 years of knee injuries. But you just come back with Hayden Hansen, who might be the best blocking tight end from college football last year, and you add that to what we're doing. So, Kchris, I mean, I just think that, when you hear Pikel and you hear Pate and you hear like the cover 3 guys and everyone, I just don't think they understand the deficit we had at the tight end position last year and how it was impacting our running game and our passing game.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a big part about it because with some of the things that Arbuckle wanted to do, you just can't do. You tried it. You stay committed to that as people are trying to, you throw out the word commitment and people are talking about the run game nowadays, but you stay committed to that, right? You try to have those inline blockers. You try to run some personnel sets. You couldn't run some of those big personnel sets. On goal line, I think one of the things we were really excited about, we saw it in the Tennessee game, kind of get on the center a little bit, right? Especially on the goal line, you weren't able to really see a lot of that. I think there's going to be some wrinkles in this offense that you see early on this season that you're just like, wow, okay, why didn't we do that last year? I think that's going to be a question that we could potentially be asking each other an awful lot. But again, yeah.
No doubt. What else is on the something that you've been seeing out of there that you like so far? As far as obviously the defense, I think we the expectation is that it's. I think around the country, and something that you brought up is the pundits around the country aren't really looking at Oklahoma as being a true, a contender. I guess it is. You hear them talk about LSU, you hear them talk about obviously Georgia and Indiana and Ohio State and those type of teams, Oregon. But
a lot of
it's
Texas, a lot of Texas.
A lot of Texas, of course, and I think that Texas belongs in that conversation. By the way, but the expectations are real there as well, and should be real there as well. But you're not hearing a lot of people that are saying the same things about Oklahoma, and kind of wonder why that is.
Well, a lot of them have taken
Notre Dame as well, yes.
In Notre Dame is definitely. A lot of them are obviously taking, they're John Mateer doubters based upon having been so pro with him in preseason last year, right? So they're feeling a little burned by that. They're not going to basically give John Mateer any props until they have a reason to, and the running game, and they'll just defer back to the stats stuff about our offense, which was bad. None of us are sitting here saying that we had an elite offense. We had an opportunistic offense during during a game stretch, for that 4-game stretch. But yeah, I think they're missing that. They're saying, well, we think the defense will be good again, and I think they're kind of missing Sooner for Life. For about like 2 days, Vegas had OU at 6.5 until they got pounded on it and moved it to 7.5, and it's still low, from most people's perspectives. I mean, I was listening to somebody talk about our win total, like, well, Florida, and they were kind of building up all of the, well, you got to go play in the swamp, and I'm like. And we're going to play the swamp. They're going to go play in Athens. And I'm like, okay, I don't disagree that those are tough places to play at, but are they any tougher than Rocky Top and Tuscaloosa? I've been to a game at every place, and they're not. They just aren't. So from that perspective, so it was just a little funny. Like, oh, they're going to go to Michigan, and I'm like, yeah, that's a Michigan team that's rebuilding heavily. That I think sometimes, and they're talking about Florida, like, oh, well, Florida could be this powerhouse under Sumrall. I'm like, okay, I think sometimes, and this is a bigger theme I was talking with my brother last night, is that Cignetti's rebuild sort of has rebooted, has people convinced that like the quick 1-year turnaround is just what happens, as opposed to what we before that got used to, right? That I think the Cignetti thing's an outlier. This isn't, Michigan had a lot of turmoil and trauma in that program going on. Same thing at Florida. They've had a lot of turnover. They don't necessarily, those programs aren't necessarily just going to all of a sudden do the Cignetti 12-0, reboot just because Whittingham is a better coach than Sharon Moore, even though he wasn't exactly doing, the Utah showing the last 2 years has been a little uneven in the Big 12.
Utah's screwed now. Utah's screwed now.
Yeah, they didn't. That was not a smart move. Not a smart move. But yeah, I think it's interesting that I'm hearing a lot about, well, the OU schedule is worse than last year. I'm like, okay, all right. We'll see. I mean, last year it was the worst. It was the best schedule in the country. Now it isn't as last year's schedule wasn't that difficult. So it'll be interesting. But definitely there's a sense that Mateer isn't going to, Mateer's not going to do it. He won't be a good quarterback unless OU fixes their running game, and that's pretty much what they're hanging their hat on.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, I can see how you get there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day, it's good to see him throwing. And somebody said something about this yesterday, and I think it may have been Carey, but talking about the mechanics and stuff like that, and he's sick of hearing about it, and that it isn't just about mechanics and all that, and that a lot of guys throw sidearm. And I would tell you that I totally agree with that. The mechanics side that I need to see better from when it comes to John Mateer is get your feet underneath you a little bit. I don't care. Arm angles are arm angles. If you got your feet set, you're going to be more accurate, right? End of story. And then not taking it, not making the wrong decision in the RPO or even being put in the position to make a bad decision in the RPO, but making the right choices, not turning the football over. And these are things that should be able to be fixed. Now, whether or not you're going to fix his mechanics all the way, I doubt it. I doubt it. And to be quite honest with you, under fire, those things always seem to go back to what they were more times than not. At the end of the day, if you put him in a position to be successful, that he doesn't have to rely on just his own legs, then you win right there. You help him be a better football player at the end of the day.
Now, Jason, my only counter to that, not necessarily even a counter, but just to kind of let me just point something out. I think like listening to his little presser that he had, you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
good.
Listening to his presser, the reason why I'm key on it with him with switching up the arm ankle throwing over top or whatever is because it means he's healthy. Because that's exactly what he pointed out. Is like, yeah,
He's going to hold the ball. Right.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
He
So
can hold on to the football.
to me, it's not necessarily the arm angles or any of that, and it's not necessary. I think for me, what it is stay in the pocket. I think that was the thing last season. I think if we could get that trust between those two, where he
Bingo.
can stay in the pocket, because again, guys, we're not too far removed from watching those highlights again of him up there. Up there at Washington State, to where you're like, hey, you played behind the worst offensive line. You stood in there, took some shots, but you delivered some balls to guys. So again, Mateer can do that, but I think that with actual help, this is the best weapons that he's had. I was talking to my uncle the other day, and he definitely was like, a healthy Mateer, he will be fine. He's like, he has to stay healthy, has to stay in the pocket.
In order to
He
stay
should
healthy,
be
you got to
fine.
stay in the pocket. These things go hand in hand, though.
Uh-huh.
That's the biggest part. And
That's
so
the biggest part of it, and that's what has to help. Obviously, what you're saying as well, sprinkle that on top in the RPO concepts, making the right decisions. But I think that if we're just being honest, I hate to say it because we're all big fans of those guys, but Keontae's got hurt and was dealing with injuries, and Giovanni came in with injuries during the season. Obviously, he was healthy coming here, but still, it just never really, he never really kind of got his. He
broke his
finally got
leg,
his
bro.
legs
Broke
under him,
his
but it
leg.
just wasn't the same as what could have been, right? So wish him all the luck at Cincinnati, but at the same time, like, when you're missing those pieces and different things like that, and those guys that you built that trust with, especially with how tight we kept that rotation last year, that's an issue as well. So it's a lot of variables, a lot of parts that go into it. But to your point, Chris Mason, I think the thing is honestly what Jason's been talking about for the longest, what a lot of people have been talking about for the longest. I think the reason why Vegas or FanDuel or whatever you want to say
Yeah.
may be a little bit low on us is simply because, hey, 6-6, 10-3, 6-6, 10-3. This is the
It's just
year.
an action number, though. You know that you're
Yeah.
going to get. That was an immediate act. And they weren't. Oklahoma wasn't the only action number there. Look
Yeah,
at Ole
no.
Miss. Ole Miss was. They had them at 7.5 as well. Still do, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a team that won 13 games last year and is bringing back their quarterback, which, by the way, became official today. The Mississippi Supreme Court denied the appeal by the NCAA, so he will be back this season.
So we should bring. We should. So it's good that we might have Owen Heineke back if Ole Miss gets to
It's
do that.
a very good opportunity to do it. Look, I mean, we haven't seen the NCAA win many of these.
No, and so yeah, no, I
At the end
think
of the day, I don't know that it's going to be a whole lot. The problem is, as we talked about before, the difference is he's trying to get Chambliss was trying to get them to uphold their rules of a medical red shirt. Heineke's trying to get them to change a rule. It's different.
yeah, we'll see. But I do think
Doesn't mean that they won't win, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Yeah, I mean the inconsistency. We talked a little bit about this. The inconsistency. Kchris and I did. The inconsistency in red shirt standards across sports is a gaping hole the NCAA should have fixed a long time ago.
If we want to go there, we can go there. Jason, I kind of disagree with that, man. It's not necessarily he's not necessarily asking the NCAA or anybody to change a rule. When college athletes college athletes go pro in different sports and then come back to college and play golf and are on the golf team. I mean, it's
But these are the things that have go to pro and come back and be on the golf team. Who?
there are plenty of college athletes that are going pro in different sports, coming back, playing, getting eligibility to play in this sport and that sport, who have played college basketball for 4 years or college football for this or whatever. They go and play in a different sport and they go back and they
Okay.
play golf or some other sport or whatever they want to do. They go
Well,
back
the
to
big one is
The
the big
other
one.
part
Reed.
would be they don't have a red shirt though. If for that, there's no red shirt, and according to the rules as I've read them, you get 4 years to play five or whatever it is that you get 4 years to play 5, and there is no red shirt for there is no such thing as a red shirt season if you play in lacrosse. So if you play 1 minute, it doesn't matter that it was 15 minutes. It's 1 minute. It doesn't matter.
it's interesting. So
I still think it sucks. I'm not saying that I agree with it. I'm just saying the point is I don't know that. I'm just trying to prepare people for that. May not be the same. It's not the same argument.
I got you, but when you look at Chambliss thing, Chambliss, like from everything that I've read, everything I've looked up on his really turned the head from hey, this illness to the red shirt to just the fact that, hey, you guys are limiting benefits because, hey, I have this contract. I'm not going to be able to, if I go pro or whatever the case may be, it's not the same thing as what I'm going to see at Ole Miss. The EA Sports cover, different things like that. That was an issue. But when you look at the Heineke, it's really interesting. I know a lot of people have already talked about it, but the timing is really key in this because you put the NCAA in a really peculiar situation.
I would agree with that a lot.
You had the COVID year, you had injuries, you had the 3 games that he played, you had the lack of a red shirt, wasn't told about a red shirt, all these things that he is putting in his argument. Again, Jason, like I've said to you before, and honestly, I kind of backtracked just a little bit on what I said, mainly because the NCAA is in quite a predicament. Everybody wants to talk about the timing, but let's talk about also the fact that you don't necessarily have the subpoena power to get those witnesses if they don't want to talk, right? You need the coach of that lacrosse team. I don't know if he's still there or if he's not, right? He doesn't have to talk to you guys. If NCAA calls upon him, there's nothing they can do because he's in Ohio, he's not in Oklahoma. Get what I'm saying? So the fact of the matter is you can't call somebody from a different state. So you're going in there ill prepared anyways. Also, if you think about the Chambliss situation, limiting benefits or whatnot, same thing. You can apply that to this situation here with on Heineke for the simple fact that, hey, if I get picked 5th or 6th round instead of the 4th round, that changes kind of the money scenario. That changes a lot of different things. And I'm being, that's limiting my benefits of being a college football player of what I could do. So there's a lot of arguments that it's different. Don't get me wrong. You're right. It's different in a sense, but there are some elements of both cases that can be applied together. Also, with Chambliss, I didn't realize this, but Chambliss attorneys are saying their precedent was already set way before they even tried something like this with some West Virginia running back. So, I mean, there are tons of cases out there. That's the reason why I gave you the example of there are tons of college athletes that go pro in a different sport, come back to college and play something totally different so they can finish out their degree or whatever the case may be, or pursue something else or whatever, or just doing something for leisure, right?
Yeah, I
But
kind of remember that from happening whenever I was in school.
yeah, I would bring up like J.R. Smith, but J.R. Smith didn't go to college. But
J.R.
there are
Smith. Yeah, J.R.
plenty of
Smith was straight out
examples
of
of
high school,
athletes
though,
who have
right?
done stuff like that, and they just go do like something random,
Mhm.
rowing or
Sure.
whatever the case may be. But
Well, JR's a stud at golf too. He
yeah,
could be,
that's what I'm saying. But
yeah,
no, I mean, like there are some things that you could do, but I think the timing element is really is really interesting because again,
sure.
you already have said because you've been there at the Chambliss hearing, you just felt like the NCAA showed up and then put up a fight. They chose to fight this out in pleadings on paper, and that just was never going to win them anything, not in the public in the court of public opinion or in actual court. So it's kind of the same thing here.
Depends
And
on which court of public opinion, because a lot of public opinion is that this isn't good for college sports. That these
it's
guys are getting to stay longer, and to some extent, I could understand that. But I think somebody said this last week, is I don't really care about this, you know, going longer, and it's hurting this and that. This has been going on for a long time, and they're
the
staying around longer as it is.
the issue. So I'll say this right here. On one hand, it's bad because it's precedent now, but on the other hand, if you're not going to stop it, then I'm not going to sit here and bitch about it. Get what I'm saying? Um, on another end, I would just say that all of this, honestly, if we're just being totally real, the problem was something that was out of all of our control, and that was COVID. When you gave everybody a chance to have that extra year of eligibility because of COVID, this is kind of a hangover effect of that.
Right.
We're finally in the years where all that stuff is kind of weeding out, but it's a hangover effect that seems to be lingering, and these are the
He's got a
byproducts of
30-year-old that's going. I don't remember where he's at. I want to say it's Utah or something like that. But some receiver that had played, and I believe he played baseball, but
yeah.
he's back now playing college football as like I think he's a sophomore or some shit. 30 years old.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Chris Wenke was 28 when he and
He
who
went to
was
baseball, but he didn't
I mean,
play
every
college baseball.
BYU player is probably like at least
yeah.
35 to the kid, but
You want to throw up this question like somebody was asking me why
go ahead.
why did he not get the red shirt year? I was going to try and I can explain that. It just
Sorry, my bad.
I'm trying to figure out where it was. All right,
Did
so
Brandon Whedon go to college?
Brandon Whedon, he was like 27, 28 too. So all
No,
right,
I know he went to
College, or did
OSU. I'm sorry,
he
Chris
just,
Mason. I know he went to OSU, but I'm talking about like, did he go to college to play baseball, or did he just
I
go
don't
to
think
the
so.
no,
minor?
I think he was a
he's in the
professional.
minor leagues. Like Quincy Carter was in the minor leagues with the Cubs. Then he went to Georgia, and then he went to the Cowboys. So all right, for maybe the last final time. All right, this is how the Heineke thing works. He played his freshman year at Ohio State, even if it was only 15 minutes. He then got hurt at OU and couldn't play, so he used his standard redshirt year. Then he played 3 seasons of football in 23, 24, and 25 after that. That's why they declared him. That's why they won't issue. That's why they don't. The NCAA, according to their rules, everything's standard. Everything's gone by the books. You don't get to apply a medical red shirt until you've lost 2 seasons to injuries. You've used the red shirt season for the first year of injury, then you lose another year, and you apply to have that called a medical red shirt. And this is the Jason White situation, right? Jason White lost basically, he lost a season in 2022 and 2021. So that's why he got to apply, and he'd already redshirted prior his first year on campus, which I think was 2000 or 99 or 2000. I think it was Brant. I think it may have been 99. He redshirted. Then 2000, he was a sophomore, freshman, and then so that's what happens if you've already used your redshirt season, and then you get injured for a full year. you can apply for an injury red shirt, but he hasn't redshirted. He did not redshirt at Ohio State. So that's a year of eligibility for just 15, 30 minutes. And then he's got 3 years where he played full time at OU at 23, 24, and 25. And then he was hurt 2022. You're exactly right. But that's his redshirt year. It's just his standard redshirt year. He'd have to have been, in order to get a medical redshirt, he'd had to have lost 2023 or 24, lost the whole season due to injury. Then he could easily apply for a medical redshirt. The NCAA would be like, yeah, sure, no problem. Here's a medical redshirt, and he'd be fine. But it's the 4 seasons playing that clears it up. So I hope that clears it up. He did redshirt in 22. It was an injury redshirt season. It was just his standard redshirt year that players have used all over the place in college football. They get hurt, they take a redshirt year, and then they play the rest of their career, and they never have to apply for a medical redshirt. But that's why, OU didn't do anything wrong. OU compliance didn't do anything wrong. OU didn't do anything wrong in this situation. It's the Ohio State season that's the problem. He needs that to be declared as a redshirt year, and then the OU year becomes a medical redshirt year, and then he's only had 3 seasons of playing, so he gets a 4th season of playing because he's not part of the he's not part of the COVID group because he enrolled in the fall of 2021.
Right.
So that's the simple explanation for it. That's how it happened. If you don't understand anything about that, ask another question. But that's why OU has to get him another year. So it's very simple.
It feels like it feels like they weren't going to really reach out for that unless they knew that it was pretty favorable. Does that seem like that's right to you, Kchris, as far as what's going on with Heineke?
I think the timing and all that stuff is interesting because it seemed like it faded, and then obviously Nagy came out with his comments, and that got everybody all riled up again. But there's a method for the madness, and I think that this may have been kind of in the plans and the fold. So I mean, we just kind of have to see. I don't think anything was steering them away necessarily, mainly because I think that. There hasn't necessarily been a case that would scare you away from at least trying to put forth the argument, right? You allowed him to go through everything that he needed to. I think that plays into a part of the timing with the Senior Bowl,
Sure.
Combine, Pro Day. So you let him do all those different things, put all that stuff out there to give that kid options, right? And I'll be honest with you, I think that the Aguilar, that's the one rare win that nobody's talking about for the NCAA. But
I
then,
think his argument was a little different, though, right? It was
He needed 2 seasons of JUCO completely wiped out.
yeah,
And
Jason,
we know Pavia won that, but that argument wasn't going to fly again.
Jason, I think that me and you could definitely argue all day, not against each other, but for the simple fact that,
yeah.
or excuse me, I think we can agree on. I don't know if Aguilar really pressed it enough. I think that he just
I don't
wanted
think
to. He just took a shot in the dark and said, "Hey, if it works, it works. If not, I'm gonna make a team somehow." Aguilar is talented.
sure.
And I think that he could make a roster. He's definitely a value pick, a day 3 guy that I think that you
Sure.
could get and put on a
I would agree.
roster and hide him out for quite a while, right?
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily know if they pressed it enough because it seems like if you press the right buttons or if you press it enough and get it hung up, you can go. But at the same time, maybe there was just a natural maturation of things, and they decided before any of that started that, hey, we're going to give this one good shot, and if this doesn't work, we go. But arguments are a little bit different, but they were
I
able
think
to
he was
weed that
arguing
out.
for I think he was one of the arguments that he was making, and that the judge kind of countered on it, that that it would be detrimental to college football or to the game or to the fans even. He was trying to argue that part, and it was like, no, the judge kind of went, I don't agree with that because the fans are tired of seeing the way things are and so many of these things. it was, but I think you're right. I think that's an arguable. I mean, the judge decided that, but it almost seemed like it was.
And he was asking for like an 8th year.
Yeah.
Aguilar has basically had like 2 years in JUCO, 2 years at somewhere else, and then like another two. Well, there's a couple more years somewhere else, and then a couple of years at App State, and then he wants 2 years at Tennessee. So it's like you played, and he's played in these seasons. It's not like this was a situation where, the Chambliss situation where, okay, well, he didn't play that year, so we'll have our opinions of how legit that argument is, but he didn't play that year, so from that perspective. So, but it's Aguilar. It's like, well, just ignore the fact I played these 2 seasons somewhere else and give me some more eligibility. And I think the judge was like, did you not play here? Well, yeah, I did. So you're asking me to wipe out the fact that you played. You knew that this was impacting your eligibility, right? Well, yeah. Okay. Well, so the Aguilar thing was kind of ridiculous from that aspect.
Yeah.
But I think, as opposed to Chambliss, who's basically just saying, well, lots of guys get have redshirt years and medical redshirt years and get to play 4 years. That's basically what he's saying. Whereas Aguilar's like, well,
and that was the argument that I was making. It's like, this is usually with Chambliss, it feels like it's a rubber stamp most of the time. So why they decided to fight him on it is still, I don't really understand it. You know what I mean?
I feel like
they used the wrong arguments and lost
because he was making the So I do wonder if this lawsuit was a little bit predicated on Heineke's folks talking to the NCAA and saying, look, if you don't, you need to give us a waiver. This isn't a big deal. This isn't a big issue. This isn't the hill you want to. This isn't the public hill you want to be fighting on. This isn't a big deal. It's basically you calling on 15 minutes of football, 15 minutes of lacrosse, a redshirt season. This isn't a huge deal. Can we just get a waiver and can we just can we agree? Can you just say that we're eligible? Say a ruling saying in the best interests of the game and in the best interests of student athlete rights. We're just going to give Owen Hine. I mean, I think they were pushing the NCAA to do the right thing, and the NCAA was giving an indication.
Dug in on. That's the other part that makes me feel like they're always going to lose, is because they're dug in on stuff that they shouldn't be dug in on, and they're not dug in on things that you would think that they might be.
Yeah, they should be taking. I mean, they did dig in on the silliness of that Alabama guy trying to come back and play college basketball after he played NBA games. Cool. And NBA games. But you're right, Jason. For the most part, this is not a hill they should be fighting on. They should just issue a waiver and move on and just say, this is unique circumstances.
Some points you look worse and worse, right? I mean, and
get some good PR, right? Like, this is an easy win. Like, we're gonna give Owen Heineke a waiver in terms of the ongoing support of student athletes' rights, which is our fundamental purpose and goal, right? Even if it isn't, you can at least throw out a PR statement that says that, right? So, Jeff Shaw, my cousin Vinny, that's in Lower Alabama, which is a completely different.
You guys real quick. I'm just going to make you understand real quick that I was in the courtroom and that's not what was going on there. The judge's decision was an hour and a half long to read because he was trying to dot his I's, cross his T's. Yeah. And at the end of the day, what it really amounted to was the NCAA didn't put up a fight.
Right. They just but they're fighting. They're faux fighting, right? They appear to be putting up a fight, but not putting up a fight, right? So
right.
It's almost
the reason that Aguilar lost, he had not a strong enough chance of winning the case on the merits. So, which is to say that he, which is usually the big dog in these injunction fights. This is the. I'm reading somebody's summary of it. He agreed that the NCAA's rule counting junior college years violated Tennessee law, but the court found that his proof focused mostly on his own lost NIL money, not a broader harmful effect on Tennessee trade, commerce, or consumers. That was the point I was talking about with like fans. The court had also concluded that trade practices law likely could not be used to police nationwide NCAA eligibility, affecting interstate commerce, and that Tennessee's NIL statute does not give private parties the right to get this kind of injunction. So, he didn't appear to accept that Aguilar faced real harm by losing a season and potentially millions in NIL.
Well,
I don't know about all that, but
yeah. So I mean, we'll see. I think Owen stands a good chance of winning, and I think based upon the Mississippi ruling, I could see the NCAA just moving on and not doing it, and not appealing it to the Oklahoma Supreme Court, who may not rule on it until January, so it may be completely irrelevant.
Hey, one thing that I just thought of. I was looking at Trojan Fights. His comment. He was like, "Didn't he attend the Senior Bowl too, along with Pro Day and Combine?" I'm not for certain on those. So legit asking. So,
Trinidad
no, he
not.
did. He went to all three of those. My
Who did? Heineke did, right?
Huh?
Heineke, is that who we're talking
Heineke.
about?
So my thought about this is that here's something else that nobody's thinking about either. If Heineke wins this, then this sets precedent for that as well, because then there's going to be some kid next year, 2 years, 3 years down the line that says, "Hey, you let Owen Heineke go through all of this, and he got to play a whole season. I got drafted. I was projected to go in the second round, but I went in the sixth round. So now I have 1 year of college football left. I want to come back and play football at my university."
But if they get but Owen's going to have to pull out of the draft.
Yeah, no,
He's gonna
that's going to
explicitly
be a whole thing. If they pull out of the draft or whatever the case may be, that's going to be it's going to be an issue at some point.
I mean,
So
the NFL.
NCAA
Once you're drafted, the NFL gets involved. Once he's drafted,
Okay.
the
Well,
NFL
let me take
draft
that out of
rights
the
make it
scenario,
different.
Chris Mason. That's what
Right.
I'm saying.
All right.
If you take that piece out of the scenario, if he doesn't get drafted, but if the kid goes through all the stuff, combine, pro day, all the rest of those things, that's what I'm saying. Focus on that. If the kid does that, has a year of eligibility left, doesn't get drafted or pulls out before and wants to go back to college because some donor or whatever says, "Hey, we got an extra million for you now. Why don't you come on back?" That's going to be an issue at some point because
No,
you're
yeah,
gonna say,
pulling out the last minute on the draft, like 24 hours before the draft hits. All of a sudden, spring ball hits, and you're like concerned about your football team. So Cody Campbell tells, I don't know what's the Bailey kid, right? I think maybe he has a year of eligibility.
Yeah.
The defensive end for Tech.
yes.
Who's going to be drafted probably in the top 10. So, maybe Texas Tech's spring game goes like crap and their defense looks like ass. And Cody Campbell tells Bailey people, I got 10 million for you to come back, and some Fugazi NIL thing that they construct. Yeah, I guess that's possible. Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, here's the other part that I would say, and we don't have to continue on this, but I believe that Owen's probably going to get this granted to him because at the end of the day, you can't show me that you have any real rules right now. And part of it is because of the fact of, as I've said 1,000 times, and I'll continue to say it, is when none of the rules that are being applied have been voted on or even discussed with the players that are going by the rules, and whether it be money or transferability and all that other stuff, when it's all one-sided, these judges are never going to stay they're not going to continue to allow the NCAA to do this. I think the precedent has been set at the Supreme Court level that it's not okay for you to screw these kids over like that anymore. They made it clear.
You don't have antitrust exemption. Stop acting like you do. You
That's
need
the biggest part. You get antitrust if you just had a collective bargaining.
Well, you'd be like the pro sports, right? Because then a judge would be like, "Did you agree to be part? Did you see the CBA? Did you sign? Did you see the negotiated agreement?"
Correct.
Yes. It's like rookies trying to argue with the NFL CBA, right? And none of them, I want to make more money than the NFL. None of them are going to court and suing for more money that the NFL rookie salary cap provides them,
Sure.
rookie scale, because the judge will say there's a collective bargaining agreement here. If you want to change this rule, change it inside your union.
Yeah.
You can't get, you're not getting any relief here because there's a good faith negotiated contract. We're not breaking it just because you want to. So you're right.
I was talking about the Supreme Court of the United States. That was
the ruling, and it was
started
old.
NIL. That was what
old.
started NIL.
And they lost. They went over. I mean,
0 for 9.
Up and down the varying intellectual beliefs on the Supreme Court. I'm not getting into any discussion of that whatsoever. Pro, con, whatever.
But you're right. I mean, they have varying beliefs.
Varying beliefs. They vote differently on a whole bunch of damn stuff, and they went 9-0. I'm like, okay. I don't know how you didn't see that decision and immediately get a CBA discussion going. Like, okay, we need to have a CBA, and they don't. And
they flat out do not want to make them employees.
And it's ridiculous considering how much they're paying them now. It's like, it's like, I don't know. It's silly, but but I think we've killed that dead horse topic.
Yes.
We have first week of spring, first couple of days of spring practice. My biggest, let's just do some final takeaways. My big takeaway would be, Brent's comments about Amani Choice and E.T. Thomas are very clear that he's sort of saying to Emmett Jones and Arbuckle, play the damn kids. He's brought them up 3 times. They've been in interviews. It's clear that Brent's saying there was a reason not to play him last year. There's no reason that they should not be playing this year, that our rotation at wide receiver should not be bigger. That's one thing we've been harping on in this offseason as well, that we want to see Emmett Jones and Arbuckle play more wide receivers. And you can tell Brent's very deliberate in who he mentions and players he mentions. And he's mentioning that E.T. and Manny Choice need to play. And Jermichael Carter. He's talked up Jermichael Carter as well. He's like, these guys need to play. They should be playing. I'm mentioning this because I'm going to be watching the offense, and I'm going to be watching what's going on offense and making sure these guys get on the field. That's my other than everything else. That's my one takeaway.
I think it's a huge takeaway too. Because we've talked about that the rotation really was not a rotation last year. There just wasn't one. And so you probably
Lewis got hurt, and again, we had a problem with guys, nobody else stepping up for a couple of games.
Right. But these guys aren't coming in, and you're not putting them in the game to get an opportunity. And if somebody's not stepping up, why are they not playing? Why? It didn't make a lot of sense to me either. But I mean, I'll tell you that, look, I wanted to see Deion Burks play as well as everybody else wanted to see him play really well. He really never did until the last parts of the season last year. He caught a couple of touchdowns, and aside from that, what did we get out of it? I mean, what did you miss by taking him out in the middle part of the year? I don't know.
That's the thing, guys, and I'm really excited about is that I feel like with the wide receivers we have, most of these wide receivers, I mean, I think Trell Harris is like 6'6", but
200 pounds.
Bigger targets that you're throwing to, not only, for the screens and, some of the little quick plays that you want to run. I mean, outside of Satania, obviously, but Satania, I think he has that speed that translates. Not to say that that Deion Burks, obviously, his 40 time will definitely disagree with what I'm saying. But if you go back to that Missouri game and you look at what they were trying to do that game, push the ball down the field, for whatever reason, I mean, don't get me wrong, he had guys beat a couple of times, but there were times where those were just kind of 50-50 jump balls. But you're throwing it to a 5'9", a 5'9" guy. Let's just call it what it is. I think bigger targets on the outside of Manny Choice, a Parker Livingston, a Trell Harris, guys like that. Because Trell Harris, if you watch his film, anytime you turn on any film with Trell Harris, all you say is yak, yak, yak. That's what he does. yards after catch. That's the type of player he is. But you have some guys who have big play capability on this team. So I think that if you take that game plan, that aggressiveness, you saw that against Missouri. You saw it a lot, honestly, against LSU as well. Middle of the field, they attacked the middle of the field so many times. It's there, but you got to have guys. But if we can actually get into a rotation and build that, and that's the interesting part. I screamed at Jason so many times last year and said, "Hey, Arbuckle builds his offense around the personnel he has, this and that, or whatever. It's time to put up or shut up." He has to do it this year, and I think that he has a bunch of guys. Chris Mason has talked at a high chip about all these guys from Trail Harris all the way down to Jasir Rogers. So, I mean, we got guys in that wide receiver room. We got to see him. We got to give him more weapons, fresh bodies, and keep it churning, keep it going.
Absolutely. And if you're getting locked in on one guy because you paid him and stuff, that's not the way to win anyway.
No.
And I do think, we've mentioned it a couple of times, and it's going to be frustrating because we all are none of us are going to be surprised if Deion Burks has a big NFL career at slot, right? As a slot receiver. Right. Yeah, and that's the problem, right? We had two slot guys and didn't have enough creativity with everything else going wrong on offense, right? No running game, offensive line changes, hurt quarterback, no tight ends. We weren't able to really. They weren't able to figure out how to get Burks and Satania on the field together and make it work. It just didn't work. We now have Trail Harris, as you said, he's 6 foot, 200 pounds. You've got Parker Livingston, who's 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", 190, 200. You've got Manny Choice, who's 6'5", 210. You've got Jaden Petit, who's 6'4", 220. And even E.T.
You still got Ivan Carrion, who's 6'6".
And you've got E.T., who's 6'1", 195. Maybe he's 200 at this point. He looks like he's chiseled out of granite. You just have very different. You have enough variety in the defense, in the group, in the wide receiver group, that you can put different bodies out there, different complementary matchups. Jasir Rogers, you can sub Satania and play Jasir Rogers at the slot. That kid's going to be deadly there. So you've got the position, you've got the positional depth and variety that would allow you to attack in a different way than you did last year. When you add all the other pieces in there too, it makes a difference, right? All of a sudden, you've got 3 targets. You've got a real blocking tight end, who can handle a defensive end and give you extra time to give Batir that extra second, stay in the pocket, read the field, find the open guy. I mean, that's why it was. Brent's being very deliberate about the guys he mentioned, right?
Run the football, and if you run the football, all of these things open up because you can be on the field longer, and you can, it.
You have more reps, so you can rotate guys in.
And on top of that, you start. The defense has to play you straight up. They can't just stay back. Stay back in the secondary and not ever come up and address the fact that you're running up the middle or out to the outside. I mean, the safeties don't just get to hang out back there and just wait for you to go deep because they know that you're not going to run the ball at them.
And you don't have to be looking in the backfield, worrying about the backfield. So if you do, then all of a sudden, Trell Harris or Satania are going deep on you, or Livingston's going deep on you. So, and you don't have a safety rotating over to help. I think a lot of folks, a lot of sort of the analyst guys looking at film said we dealt with a lot of too high safeties, right? Because we couldn't run the ball, and it hurt our passing game. I don't know if that's. I won't profess to being the film guru guy to say that. I know that for a fact.
It absolutely did. It hurt the passing game. Absolutely.
But I'm pretty sure that we heard I could say that every week, pretty much. So that's my big takeaway is that beyond everything else, it looks
it doesn't take an NFL player to understand how offense works.
Yeah. So, but that's my takeaway. Okay, Chris, you got anything else? I know you just sent us a. You sent us a little Instagram video. Anything else you've seen?
Nothing, honestly. Who's all? Jason, are you going to the spring game?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's what, the 21st?
April 18th.
April 18th. Yeah. I'll be there. I will be there.
That's all I got. I'm gearing up for that, man. Because
Yeah.
I definitely more than any year gonna be paying a lot of attention to the trenches, man. Just seeing kind of, hey, what are these guys' activity like, right? Are we
Yep.
athletic? Are we giving stuff up? Some telltale signs I think we can get from this spring game this year as far as how comfortable we feel kind of going in there. I think that obviously they're not going to open up everything. It's going to still be vanilla, pretty plain Jane or whatnot, but it will be interesting just to see what those trenches look like, different guys, see new guys or whatnot. So we'll go from there.
Yeah, Stephen G. Shout out to Jenny and the ladies. Sweet 16, big game tomorrow. It'd be awesome. This is what, her 5th time in the Sweet 16?
You beat South Carolina once. Let's do it again. 4 o'clock tomorrow, y'all.
I think it's the 3rd time. They got a weird matchup one year. I think it's the 3rd time. But yeah, I mean, this is, yeah. I mean, I think they can beat the other half of the bracket if they can get past South Carolina. But that's a big ask. But they've done it.
It's huge. I mean, this is they're one of the best teams in the country, without a doubt, best programs in the country. But they also look. This freshman has done. She's unreal, man. She's unreal, and she's not just about scoring. She can do a lot. She does everything, and but they got they got a team. It's not just her. Even they've got players that do their job, and she's definitely been huge for it. But Jenny has done a fantastic job at Oklahoma.
Poor. It was funny when Brent was talking about in his interview, he was talking about all the spring sports. And he just kind of glosses over men's basketball. He's like gymnastics, he's baseball, softball, women's hoops. He's like, and then he's like, oh, and he was like went down everything, and then he's like, we'll just gloss over. We'll just gloss over men's hoops.
Hey, college basketball crown. That's what we're doing. You know what I'm saying? April, baby. Be ready for it.
Vegas.
Well, hey, yeah, I'm good on the rest of it, man. I hope everybody enjoyed the show tonight. Just let us know what you think about, what do you think has been drop it in the comments. Let us know what you think has been the biggest
early takeaway
revelation, or what do you think has been the biggest thing for you about this early spring practice time, and what do you see moving forward? Obviously, we'll be talking about plenty of this moving forward, guys. Plenty. So, anything else from you guys? Make sure you like and subscribe to all the pages. It helps us out more than you know. And hey, Kchris is really close to 1,000. I'm still waiting on 5,000. But make sure you hit that like button, subscribe. We can look at the analytics and see that about half of you are not subscribers. So you can become subscribers. So appreciate everybody coming in. We'll see you all on the next one.